So first off, I have to ask, how's everybody doing? Everybody having a good conference? Everybody liking the session so far? Yay! Woo! I do want to give a big shout out to all of the sponsors, because without sponsors, conferences like this don't happen. I don't get to be here. You know, you all get to be sad because you know that I'm not there, things like that. And so, huge thank you to sponsors. I also especially want to thank Protegra for this amazingly wonderful cup that they gave me that I begged off of them, because frankly, if I have an open container of water up here, it will get spilled, and that's never a good thing. Again, yes. I spilled it all over electronics at a talk once, and it like literally within a half an inch missed a very major power junction that would have probably fried the whole room that I was in. So, 5 stages of entrepreneurial grief. So there's this kind of mythology around startups these days. There's this big glamorization of what happens with, you know, startups, woo, I'm going to be rich and famous and going to do my own thing. And it's just all this glory talk, especially in the media with places like Hacker News and Reddit and, you know, all these companies out there that just want to tell you how great and glorious the idea of a startup or entrepreneurship or bootstrapping a business is. And frankly, there is a lot of amazing stuff that goes on inside of startups and inside of entrepreneurial work. I've been doing this for about 3 or 4 years now, and I've kind of had an entrepreneurial streak in me for most of my life, and I've done various small things throughout my life. My dad's been a big entrepreneur my whole life and has had a huge influence on me. And so while there is some truth to the media portrayal of how great and grand the startup life is and the entrepreneurial life is, there is a reality that nobody ever talks about. And I wanted to share some of my own personal experiences with that reality and talk about how I've realized over the last 6 months to a year or so that this reality of the startup life and the entrepreneurial life directly maps onto the 5 stages of grief, which, if you're not familiar with, the 5 stages of grief talks about the emotions that we go through when we face loss in our life. Loss of friends, loss of loved ones, loss of the things that matter most in our lives, and how difficult that can be to deal with. And not everybody goes through these stages at the same time, at the same rate, or with the same kind of visible outward appearances. For myself, I tend to skip straight from stage 2, anger, right past bargaining and go straight into depression. Bargaining is like, and then I'm on to depression. It's not something that I go through for a very long period of time, but it is still something that I tend to go through. I kind of do bargaining a little bit after I get into depression, and it makes it really, really difficult to deal with bargaining at points. But these 5 stages are interesting because you can see different people in different situations going through them. Like, I had a friend in college who came to this college following a good friend of his, and they had been best friends for like 20 years, a really long time. And so my friend had his identity wrapped up in this other person as, them being friends. And when that other person started to redefine who they were and started hanging out with other people and doing different things, my friend had a really hard time dealing with that. He just couldn't get his head wrapped around it very quickly and easily. And so he went through all 5 of these stages here, starting with denial, where he just flat out vehemently denied the possibility that this other person could change and that this other person could move on with their life and do different things. And he moved from there into the anger of, no, this will not happen. I won't let it happen. And from there, he went into bargaining to where he was pleading, literally pleading with this person, tears in his eyes, to get them coming back together. And this wasn't even a romantic relationship. This was just 2 good friends that had been friends for so long that one of them had his identity wrapped up in the other person. And I saw my friend go through these 3 stages literally in a matter of minutes as we were talking one night. And so you don't always get these long extended periods. He went into depression after that, and that took quite a while. That was weeks or months of time for him to get over that. But finally, after he started to accept who the other person was becoming, then he moved past all of that, and they became good friends again. And they went back to having their own lives. They went on to have their own lives, but went back to being friends as well. And it was a good situation overall. And I found that in the world of business and the world of entrepreneurship, I go through these same emotions pretty much linearly, like the 5 stages of grief talks about, but also cyclically. There's never going to be this one linear time that I go through it. It's going to happen over and over and over again. And in the 5 stages of entrepreneurial grief, we have denial of the value that you provide to your customers and denial of the problems that your products and services have. We have anger at your potential customers and your former customers, and anger at your competition for stealing your customers. We have bargaining with potential customers, people that you want to bring into your service, people that you want to pay attention to you. We have depression over the fact that your startup and your business is not yet profitable and that you've lost a lot of money and time in this and it's not working out the way that you want. And finally, we have acceptance of the work that there actually is to do. But before we get into the 5 stages, I want to add my own first stage to this, to the entrepreneurial life, or stage 0, which is the frenetic energy. And the frenetic energy comes about when you first have that spark, that idea, that little something, and you go off and you start coding, and you do an experiment, or you start designing, and you do something to see if this would even work. And it does work. And there's opportunity, and there's possibility. And you start to think, could this be possible? Could this be a legitimate business, a product, a service, or whatever it is? And you get really excited about this. And it happens to pretty much anyone that goes through and starts building something that they're going to either give away as open source or free products or sell. It's just something that everybody goes through, at least in my experience. You get excited about what you're doing, and you want to work on these things, and it's fun. And I've gone through this multiple times. So I have multiple products and services that I have released over the last however many years, including my 2 main ones, SignalLeaf, which is a podcast audio hosting service, and Watch Me Code, which is screencasts centered around JavaScript for developers. And so there's a bit of background to where I'm coming from with all of these lessons learned and these 5 stages. I want to tell you a bit about how these things got started and how I found all of this energy to start working on these. So with Watch Me Code, it actually started as somebody that I kind of sort of halfway knew, had talked to on Twitter a number of times, reaching out to me and say, hey, I've been talking a lot with pragmatic programmers, and they want to get back into doing videos and screencasts, and I really like what you've been writing about Backbone.js on your blog, and I think you have this great teaching style. Do you think you could translate that into video? And it's like, yeah, I can do that, no problem. I've done audio editing, professional audio editing for however many years. That was my major in college. I can totally do video as well. I got the basic idea down, so I can do this. And it was exciting and fun. And as I was building that screencast series for pragmatic programmers, I realized, hey, I've got all this other code, all these other things that I'm doing that I think would be valuable for other people to see. And so I started doing my own recordings and my own screencasts, and I released them as Watch Me Code. It was really exciting and really fun to work on at first. And same thing with SignalLeaf. It's really fun. It was a really interesting experiment. It actually started as an idea, as a question that a friend of mine had on a private mailing list. He had been doing WordPress for a while for his church and doing a podcast through WordPress for his church. And he was tired of WordPress and tired of the limitations that his hosting provider was putting on bandwidth, and wanted to know, is there a simple way for me to just put an MP3 file out there and get an RSS feed and embed that into a static site generator like Jekyll or whatever static site generators you want to use? So I spent half a day, actually closer to a full day, just in experimentation mode. I wanted to see what would it take, would it even be possible for me to put an MP3 file up on Amazon S3 and securely deliver it to a podcast. And by securely, I mean you cannot just go out to the S3 URL and download it. You have to hit my service so that I can track the number of downloads and and get all the geolocation information out of your IP address and the browser or podcasting app or whatever, and do all this analytics and give you information about who is downloading your podcast, when and where. And it worked. It was amazing. It was fun. It was exciting. I loved working on Signal Leaf at first. And it was tremendously rewarding to build something that people were going to want to use. But over time, as I was building these things out, I started to realize there's a lot of work here. There's a lot of things that need to be done, even to produce just the bare minimums that somebody else can use. Yeah, sure, I can write 100 lines of code, and I can use it no problem, because I don't mind doing manual garbage to get me up and running. But if somebody else wants to use this, there's authentication and authorization and payment systems and being able to sign up, and there's all this work involved in getting things actually ready to be released. And it's when you get into that grinding, slogging, just, is this thing done yet? That's when you start really reaching into stage 1 of the 5 stages, denial. And this comes about when you're getting close to the end of that first real death march in your product or service. You start to see, I'm getting close to that light at the end of the tunnel, and I'm terrified because I know every last little problem that exists in these things. I know all the mistakes I made in that screencast. I know where all of the bugs are in Signal Leaf. I know how this thing is going to fail, and I am terrified of releasing this for somebody else to use. So I start denying the value that I provide. I had Signal Leaf up and running. I had Watch Me Code, my first episode, recorded and ready, and just not released for weeks. And I was finding every excuse I could because I was terrified of the response that I would get, terrified that nobody would want to buy it, terrified that somebody would buy it. The idea of success was terrifying. And so I'm just like, nope. I'm going to have to redo this. I'm going to have to just go back and do it again. And it took a number of counseling sessions with friends of mine who were selling things to realize you can't do that. You just got to release the thing. You got to get it out there. Otherwise, you never will get it out there. And with Signal Leaf, it was especially bad because I knew about all of the problems that Signal Leaf had, all of the shortcomings and corners that I cut, and all the potential problems for denying, for having problems and having crashes. And there will be crashes. There were crashes. There were catastrophic failures in Signal Leaf early on, even not so early on. There was a time, give me a second. There was a time in Signal Leaf where I had been running for 6 months or so on a free database plan. And that free database plan worked in terms of performance, but it had a very hard file size limit. And as I started adding more and more tracking data for analytics, I very quickly grew into that file size limit until one day I couldn't write anything else to the database. So nobody could upload a new podcast episode. Nobody could log into the application because it needed new session information in the database. Nobody could do anything except still download existing episodes. I got really lucky in that I had my media server separate from the main website. So people were still listening to episodes, but all of that tracking data was getting stuck inside of my messaging system. And for 4 days, it was down until somebody told me, hey, I haven't been able to log in for 4 days. And so I went and looked into it, and I figured out, oh, crap, I need to upgrade my database. Let me go do that. And in the process of upgrading my database, I deleted my production database. You want to talk about just sheer panic. I mean, just... I literally sucked in like that. I didn't know what to do. I was terrified. I was mortified. I was ready to just shut down. I didn't know what to do other than shut down. I wanted to crawl under a rock and cry. And I finally realized, okay, in the database upgrade process, I was testing it. And in testing it, I wanted to make sure my production data worked. So I made a copy of it. I have a copy. Thank you. I have a copy. Let me restore this. But crap, what am I going to tell people? You know, it's been down for a couple of hours already. Do I even tell people? No. And that was my first answer. No, I don't tell anyone. I just fix it and ignore. And then I started thinking about, you know, when there are problems with services and products that I use, like trying to hold a phone in my hand and suddenly I have no cell reception. You know, who would ever do that, right? Who would ever deny that problems exist in their service? Well, okay, a lot of people do deny problems in their products and services, and it never turns out well. It's always a problem for the customers and for the company. People get angry when you deny problems like that, and there will be problems. So be open about it and admit when there are problems, and people will thank you for it, surprisingly. But the idea of denying problems, and you will at some point deny that a problem exists. It's just human nature to say, well, works on my machine, so why wouldn't it work for you too? And that very directly leads into anger. Anger from your customers that turns you angry and turns a whole bad situation into an even worse situation. Anger is a very powerful thing for human emotions. It can cause us to do things that we had never thought possible, with adrenaline rushes and, you know, the ability to run and jump and all those things that anger can do for us. But it's just a horribly terrifying, terrible thing to really get sucked into and torn apart with. It's bad. And I've been angry a countless number of times as an entrepreneur. I've been angry at my customers, which is never a good thing. I've been angry, like with Watch Me Code. When I first released that first episode, I was on top of the world. People were buying it, and they were saying good things about me. But wait, there's these people that are saying bad things about me. And there's Hacker News and Reddit that are cesspools of anger and hatred. And as an entrepreneur, do yourself a favor and just block those websites. I mean, it's funny to say it, but seriously, block those websites, because you will never find anything positive about what you're doing on those websites. So I get angry. I get mad that people are getting screencasts from what I realized are dozens of other screencast sites out there, and how they're all the same, and how I'm the same, and I'm trying to do the same things. And why aren't you, dear customer, buying my stuff? Why are you going to them and buying their products when mine is so much better? And the anger just really, it can drive you into the ground and drive away what few customers you may have had. And you have to realize, okay, you're going to get angry, but you need to set that aside. And the easiest way that I have found to set that aside is to throw my hands in the air. Fine. What do you want? What can I do to beg and plead and give you the thing that would make you pay attention to me? And you start bargaining with customers. And you start doing things that seem absolutely insane, offering anything and everything that you can think of. You know, I'll wash your lawn, I'll mow your windows, I'll paint your trees. What do you want me to do? And this bargaining, you know, it turns into giving away a lot of stuff, a lot of services, a lot of products that are tangentially related. Here, I'll sign up for my service, and you'll be entered into a raffle for a free, you know, microphone as a podcaster. Or here, let me give you this free episode of Watch Me Code, and then that'll hopefully get you to want to buy from me. And so you start bargaining with customers, and you start coming up with all these crazy schemes to get people to pay attention to you and to become your customers. You know, I did a lot of this, quite honestly. I would spend time on Twitter, especially for Signally, if I would spend time on Twitter looking for people that were saying they wanted to start a podcast. And I would start asking questions to them. Like, hey, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? What are you going to do? And I started directing the conversation so that I could hopefully get them to engage with me so that I could hopefully get them interested in Signal Leaf. And a lot of one-on-one hand-holding and a lot of giving away service for free, giving away products for free. And I was literally paying people to use my service a few points in time. I had a customer that paid me $5, my very first $5 for Signal Leaf. And then Signal Leaf broke. And so I refunded his $5. I fixed my problem, but part of the problem was also his file. So I fixed his file. And then I re-uploaded it for him, and I fixed his RSS feed configuration. And then I gave him another month free as a way to apologize for all the problems that I was having. I paid him in my time and in bandwidth costs and the refund that I gave him so that he would use my service. And it works for a while. You'll end up getting customers. You'll start to build relationships with people. And that's actually not a bad thing. Bargain with people and get them to come to your service. But you'll find as well that it doesn't work for everyone. There will be people that go to other services. They may even come to you first, but they're not necessarily going to stick around. They're going to end up going to your competitors or doing it themselves or whatever the case may be. And it's really difficult to deal with that, especially when they are saying nasty things about you as they're walking away. And those nasty things really start to hurt. And again, Hacker News and Reddit, it's awful. But there are more than just, hurt feelings in all of this. Because you start to realize just how much money you've spent on this bargaining and how much time and effort you've put into this. And you start wondering, is this thing ever really going to make it? And that's when stage 4 comes around. Stage 4 is horrifying. It is quite literally soul-sucking. Depression is a terrible, terrible thing. And if you've never gone through a real bout with depression at whatever level, whatever severity, whatever period of time, if you've never experienced depression, it will suck the life out of you and make you not care about anything or anyone. I would not wish that on anyone. And I've gone through depression as a teenager, in college, in my professional life, as an entrepreneur. And there's a lot of different causes for depression, especially as an entrepreneur. So many negative things that you will just latch onto and won't be able to get away from. And for me, one of those big negative things was watching my bank accounts and realizing at the end of 2014, I have $25,000 in credit card debt. No joke, no lie. $25,000 in credit card debt. And that was trying to pay them down every month for the last year. So I had this podcast that early 2014, I'd gone through the whole bargaining thing with them. I had convinced them that they wanted to use Signal Leaf. I'd helped them a lot, spent a lot of time on phone calls and email with them. And they're like, yeah, we really appreciate the help. We understand that you might have some problems, but we're okay with that because we're just starting out and we want to support you because you've been so helpful. And it was great. And then they released their first episode, and they had 15,000 downloads on their first episode. An unheard of number of downloads on any podcast anywhere, unless you're like Adam Carolla, some huge name that's already got a massive audience. And then they kept releasing episodes that kept growing. And pretty soon they were spending $800 a month of my money in bandwidth costs at 45,000 downloads a week across all of their episodes. And when you look at Amazon's prices for bandwidth, you think, 12 cents a gigabyte, chump change, I can pay that until you start delivering 15 terabytes of data every month because you have one podcast that's getting 45,000 downloads a week. And so I went through months of denial with this particular problem, thinking, okay, I'm sponsoring them now, and they're advertising for me, and I'm going to get some customers, and we'll make up for it, and everything will be happy. No. $12,000 later, I had to tell them, sorry, look, you guys are killing me. I mean, quite literally eating my lunch. You're going to have to go somewhere else. And they were understanding, and they were polite about it, and I put a lot of work into helping them move because I wanted to support them. I really believed in what they were doing with their podcast, and they were kind enough to take a chance with me, so I put in a lot of effort to help make it easy for them to go somewhere else. And they did, and I thought things were done and over. And then I got this email from the guy that ran that podcast who accidentally told me, instead of his new hosting provider, that things were going great and he loved the analytics at his new hosting provider instead of what I had provided him. That was enough to make me crawl under my desk and cry. I mean, seriously, just heart-dropping, horrifying. But you can't sit there forever. I mean, and a lot of people, unfortunately, do. They see things like that happen, and they close up shop. They shut things down. I'm never going to be able to do this because this one person hated me so much and accidentally sent this email to me. I mean, I've been on the opposite end of that. I accidentally emailed an ex-girlfriend of mine in college when I was meaning to email one of my friends and rant about her, and that was a horrible situation. And I'm very, very, very sorry for having done that. That was awful. But eventually you realize, eventually you will realize, you know what? I can't stop now. I can't give up yet. This was just one person. I've got these other customers that still use me. Yeah, okay, I'm $25,000 in credit card debt, but I can get out of that. I've mitigated that problem, at least for now. And hopefully I can mitigate it if it happens again sooner because I've gone through that, so I know how to deal with it. And when you start getting to that point, you start realizing it came close to the end of my business, but it wasn't the end of my business. That's when you start thinking, okay, I've gone through all of these problems. I've faced all of these challenges. I think I can do this still. I think I can actually make this work. I think I can accept the amount of work that there is to do to really turn this into a viable business. Not a VC-funded thing where you're hiring like mad and have all this infinite amount of money and runway and all those other things. I mean, yeah, that's fine if that's your thing, but as a bootstrapper or a solo founder, I think I can do this. I see the work that there is in front of me. Challenge accepted. So I'm going to do the work. I'm going to put in the effort. I'm going to go through the struggles and the heartaches. And I know that the more work I put into this, the more work there will be. The only reward for good work is more work. And that's what you want as an independent, whether you're a consultant or building products and services. You want people to tell you, I love this. Thank you so much. I want this now. Because that drives features and functionality and capabilities and feedback that is absolutely critical that will help you see what work there is left to do. And it will be a never-ending amount of work, and that's okay. You need to understand that you will not have an end goal that will be permanent. You will have milestones and markers that will point you to the next goal and the next milestone and marker. And so as you go through these 5 stages, and you come out the other end with acceptance and with hope, you'll realize as well that these 5 stages are not linear. They don't happen once and that's it. They are cyclical. And that's okay as well, because every time you go through these 5 stages, every time you run into one of these problems and you solve it and you move on, you learn something new. You learn something about yourself. You learn something about your business. You learn something about the opportunities that are out there. And every time you learn something, that's an opportunity to do better and to grow and to have experience that helps you move on. And there are a lot of things that I've learned by going through these 5 stages many, many, many times. And I want to share some of those additional things at this point. So the first of which goes back to bargaining and those one-on-one conversations that I was having. If you're trying to grow a business and scale out to an X number of users where X is some big number, but you only have 1 or 2 users, you're wasting your time. Spend the time on one-on-one relationships. Spend the time hand-holding. Spend the time talking to the individual people, because that will build the relationships that you need, which will gain customers for you. You don't need to scale your ability to attract customers until you can attract customers. What you need is relationships. What you need is bargaining with people. And it turns out that all that bargaining that you did previously wasn't actually a bad idea. Yeah, you made mistakes and you spent a lot of time and money on things that failed, but those are lessons learned as well. Now you know what kind of bargaining doesn't work in your situation. So find new bargaining tactics and start calling it marketing, because that's what marketing is. It's bargaining tactics. It's a way to get people to pay attention to you. It's something that you give to them, some value that you provide in exchange for them giving value back to you. Monetary, usually. Then there's anger, which I want to talk about again. Anger is a horrible thing, as I said before, and it will happen. But anger is a two-way street. You're going to get angry at your customers, and they're going to get angry at you. You're going to get angry at your competition, and they're going to get angry back. And you have to understand that anger is inevitable, but it does not have to be expressed publicly. It is incredibly important for you as the business person to be the level-headed one in the responses. When you get angry, and it will happen, put the keyboard down. Walk away, maybe even forever from that situation. Just ignore the trolls, the people that are just spewing hate. You know, you can't always. Sometimes people will just continue pestering you and you got to do something about it. But always do it with a level head, calm and collected, no matter how angry you are. Because chances are, when you reply to that one little tiny thing of truth in the anger, they'll calm down when you say, I am so sorry this happened, here, let me help you. And you can turn people that were previously enemies into allies. And when you have allies out there in the world as customers, they start telling their friends about how great you are. About how, I got so pissed off at him, but he was so cool because he did all this work for me to help me out, and you really should use the service because he's totally going to help you get up and running too. That is the ultimate right there, when people start telling their friends about your service, your product, your helpfulness personally. That's how you build your audience at first. And you got to be kind of careful when building features. No matter how many times people send you feedback about, oh, I would love to do this, love to do that, love to do the other, you can't just run off and do those things right away. If you have features in your system that are broken, you need to polish those features. Put down the hammer and the nails and the designs for that new thing and go fix the problems that your system has. Otherwise, you're just going to lead people straight into anger again, which is certainly not what you want. Polish and shine and make the things that you have already, make them so great that nobody wants to use anything else. When was the last time anybody in here said, oh man, I love this service. It is so amazing at doing everything so poorly. Nobody talks about how they love Team Foundation Server because it does everything that management wants and it does it all poorly. Nobody talks about how great broken things are. But when was the last time you talked about a product or service to one of your friends because it only did one thing and it did it so incredibly well that you would never for a moment think about using another product or service to solve that problem again? I do that on a regular basis. I talk about the products and services that I use that only do one thing because they do it so well. And I love how it solves that problem for me. And I don't care that this other thing does 10 times more. This one does it so freaking well. But as you're building out features and functionality and you're polishing and shining, you will realize that there is an infinite amount of work, as I said before. And when you see that infinite amount of work, as my father told me while he was helping me paint my son's room, And I let out this deflated sigh, just looking at how much work we had left to do. Don't look at the elephant. Just keep chewing. Because when you look at that elephant, especially at the beginning, you're going to realize just how massive this thing is and how much work there is to do. You just got to just get down to it. Start working. Do the work. Just day in, day out. Even if it's just 10 minutes and you do one thing that day, just do the work. Just show up, get the job done, and over time you'll look back and realize, wow, I'm all the way up to the midsection of this elephant, and people are paying me for it now. Wow, I'm all the way up to the front legs. Wow, I'm up to the neck. I've only got this trunk left. But then you'll see that there is another elephant holding on to the other end, and there will be more work to do. And that's okay, because you've accepted that. You've got to the point where you know that the work will never end. You're just reaching milestones as you go. One of the easiest ways to make things really difficult for yourself when you see the elephant in front of you, though, is to look at your competitors. Looking at your competitors is not a bad thing. You can get a lot of really good information from your competitors' products and services. But those competitors' products and services can also make your elephant infinitely large, because you'll realize how much you don't do that they actually do already. And that can be kind of terrifying, and it can make you kind of envious and make you kind of bitter that they've got all this already, and you get mad at your competitors that way, and you start to see your competitors as enemies, when the reality is your competitors are not enemies. As Pippin Williamson says here and in a follow-up blog post that he did from this tweet, don't view your competitors as enemies. Yeah, they are competitors, but competition is great in business. It drives innovation. It forces you to get better at what you're doing, at the few things that you are doing. When your competitor is trying to do everything. Like with Signal Leaf, I don't do a lot of things that my competitors do, and I won't do them, at least not yet. I say I won't, I say never, but the word never always comes back to bite you and you end up doing that thing anyways. So I say not yet, and I say no, and I say I won't. Because I know that I need to focus and polish and shine what I have, and I'm going to look at what the competitors are doing for the things that I'm doing. And I see that they're doing things better than me. And I see that I am doing things better than them as well. So it's a great way to gauge where you are and how well you're doing. And you can use that as leverage in your bargaining and marketing. You can say, don't do this old busted. Go do the new hotness, which I've got. So don't view your competition as enemies, because they are not enemies. Chances are your enemies are out there scared to death as well. Like in the podcasting community, there's half a dozen really big players out there. And they are all tremendously nice people. I've sent more than one podcast to my competitors because I realized that that particular podcast needed was better served over there. And I've had competitors answer my technical problems. Hey, I'm running into this issue. I don't know what's going on. Oh, you need to support HTTP 1.1 with this particular verb. Oh, thank you so much, Mr. Competitor. It's a community. It really is. And when you start reciprocating like that with your competitors, you end up lifting the entire market. And as the entire market lifts, so do you, and so does your business. So if there's one thing that you get out of everything that I'm saying today, it's that you really shouldn't try to do this alone. Whether or not you're talking to your competitors or talking to friends or talking to other people in the same space as you, don't try to do this alone. Even if you're a solo founder, bootstrapping this thing, spending your own time and money on it, find other people that will support you and can support you, and the same people consistently over and over again every single week. This tends to be called a mastermind group in entrepreneurial terminology. And the idea of a mastermind group is that every week you get together with the same people. Hopefully a diverse group of people, hopefully a group small enough that you can share intimate secrets and problems, but large enough to have varying and differing viewpoints and ideas about how to solve problems. personally, I tell this to people over and over again, without my entrepreneurial support group, without the mastermind group that I am part of, I would not be here today. Literally in this room. I would not be in this room talking to you. I would not have Signal Leaf. I wouldn't have Watch Me Code. I wouldn't have written that book that I wrote a couple years ago. I wouldn't be doing the marketing that I'm doing. I would not be here because I would have thrown in the towel and given up a long time ago. I so desperately wanted to give up so many times. And it was my entrepreneurial support group, my mastermind group, that talked me out of it. And I'm so thankful for them. Last April, I was on the verge of shutting down Watch Me Code. I was depressed. I really was. And I was talking to my entrepreneurial support group about this. And you can actually hear the conversation because we decided that we wanted to share our knowledge with the world. So we started recording our mastermind group meetings, and we're releasing it as a podcast at entrepreprogrammers.com. Go find episode 4 of Entre Programmers, and you will hear the depression coming out of me and my desire to get rid of Watch Me Code and how horrible I felt at the time and how they talked me out of it. And like literally 2 weeks later, I went from I hate this, I never want to do it again to I just made $2,000 in a week. And that's $2,000 of recurring revenue. Thank you so much, guys, for talking me out of quitting. Because I now have a monthly baseline of $2,000 coming in where I previously was getting like maybe $300 or $400 a month for the amount of work that I was putting in. And all I did was listen to my support group and do the things that they suggested, which in my case turned out to be turning Watch Me Code into a subscription service. But it was the most brilliant thing I could have done because it not only got me out of the depression and the funk that I was in and helped me realize, yeah, there's a lot of work to do, but I'm willing to do it because now I've got all of this residual income coming in. But that depression that I went through, it really was horrifying, even though in this case it was short-lived. It was devastating to me because, I wanted to give up. I wanted to throw the towel in. I wanted to move on. And as I said before, depression is really a horrifying thing. And it's something that we don't ever really talk about in our society and in business. And that's a problem. There are a lot of mental illnesses in the world and in business. Chances are there are people in this audience or watching the video that I'm recording right now that have some form of mental illness. And it's not okay to ignore it and brush it to the side. And it's not okay for other people to tell us, just suck it up and, think happy thoughts, because that doesn't work. There are legitimate physiological things going on inside of our brains that prevent us from being able to do that. So if you have ever suffered depression, if you know anyone that does, if you know anyone with any kind of mental illness, please check out the work of Ed Finkler at funkatron.com/OSMI. His open sourcing mental illness material is phenomenal. He is very open and very personal about the problems that he has faced in his life and what it does to him, and the research that he does to educate us as developers. He's a great software developer and a great person overall. Does some pretty amazing music as well, or did back in the 90s when I first met him. But this material is incredibly important, along with Dave Mosier's The Empathy Equation from earlier today. This is the kind of stuff that we need more focus on in technology and in business. So hopefully we get through this. We work through it somehow. We find support. We go to therapy. We do whatever it takes to get through this. And we accept the work that there is to be done. And we move on. And eventually we become successful. I made $5,000 off of Watch Me Code last month for approximately 15 hours worth of work. That's an incredibly high billable hour. I made $3,000 off of 3 hours of work in that $5,000 of income. $3,000 off of 3 hours of work because I managed to leverage what I already had, repackaged it in a different way, and sold it to people that could not pay for a monthly subscription. But they could buy an individual package. So yeah, there are problems. We will face difficulties. We will have struggles as entrepreneurs. But it is so very worth it if you can get through those problems and learn the lessons that you need to do. I cannot work for a person or company ever again as an employee. I tried it. I spent a couple of years as an independent consultant, and I said, you know, this is great. But here's this other opportunity that was formerly my dream job. Really, truly my dream job. And I went to work for that company, and I loved it. It was what was previously my dream job. And a year later, I realized it was previously my dream job. And how my dreams have changed since then. And how, as an entrepreneur, you know, I go through all this pain and heartache and frustration and difficulty. And at the end of the day, I love it. I am so much better at everything I do today because of it. Because I've taken the time to learn the lessons, to get through the struggles, and to come out the other end a better developer, because I have more experience in solving problems as my systems crash and as I delete my databases. I come out at the end as a better marketer, because I've bargained and thrown money down the tube so many times and I know what doesn't work for me. I come out the other end as a better speaker, because I'm constantly talking to people. And I'm constantly having to explain the value of things in a way that is relatable to other people. Not just me and my knowledge, but how do I express that to other people? I come out of this ahead of the game for every single problem that I have and that I work through. And it is absolutely worth it. And if you are thinking about building something yourself, building a product, building a service, selling something, even just giving it away as open source on GitHub, be prepared to go through these stages, because you will inevitably go through these stages in cycles, over and over and over again, at varying degrees, varying speeds of the cycle. It will happen, but it is absolutely worth it in the end. And you can do it. You can get out there, you can get through all of this, and you can become successful. Thank you. So we have quite a bit of time left. This is like an hour and 15-minute session. I've gone through 45 minutes of it. If you are interested in anything that I do, hit DerickBailey.com as the primary URL, and you'll get links to everything else. There are some of my other URLs and some of my products and services listed here. I am recording this. It will be up on YouTube, hopefully later today, assuming that I can get good Wi-Fi connection to do that. So this will be made available to everyone. But I'd like to see if there are any questions at this point. I know I covered a lot of material. Anything that you want to ask about me, my business, my finances, just about the only thing that I won't tell you are my passwords and secret keys. But anything else is really open.
This is the first time you give this talk?
First time I'm giving this talk, yes.
Really good.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. So I've been preparing it for quite some time, and I've practiced it over and over again. And there were slides that I added an hour ago to help transition between some of these sections. But yes.
Well, did you draw your slides?
I did draw all of my slides, all of those pictures throughout. So I use my iPad for that. I use the paper app and the pencil stylus. You don't have to use the pencil stylus, but I like the pencil stylus. But I use the paper app to draw all of those. So every one of those drawings are original drawings by me. Yes.
A little bit off topic, but do you have any advice for people that they have an idea and they want to start something and maybe start their own startup or something like that, but they're trying to balance working full-time, family, that sort of thing? Like, how do you find the time to put all your effort into something like this without, saying, "Oh, screw the bills, I'm just going to put it on my credit card"? Right.
Yeah. How do you find time? How do you manage the bills? Manage personal life? That is a really difficult thing to do. The unfortunate situation is not everybody is going to be able to. Everybody talks about, just pull yourself up by your bootstraps and you work 7 p.m. to 2 a.m. every night. And it's not the reality that a lot of us can live. Some of us are lucky to get an hour a night that we spend with our significant others. And then we got to go to sleep because we got to wake up at the butt crack of dawn and go back to work 2 or 3 jobs just to support the people and situations that we have. So my best advice is solve the problems that you have now, hopefully in a way that you can reuse and that would be marketable to others. There's a danger in doing that, in solving problems that your employer has, because chances are they will own the intellectual property for that. Chris Hartjes, a guy named Grumpy Programmer on Twitter, has a pretty good solution to this. He ended up finding a different job, which is difficult to do sometimes, but you may be able to do this with your existing employer, where he approached his employer and worked out a deal where he only works 4 days a week, Monday through Thursday, but he works like 10 hours a day, Monday through Thursday. So he gets his 40-hour week in. And then Friday is all him. He knows Friday, I'm hitting it. 6 a.m., 6 p.m., whatever the time frame is that he does, he hits it hard. And he produces some pretty amazing stuff. He's got a series of books on testing in PHP and screencasts on that and all kinds of really amazing stuff he's doing. So, maybe you'll be lucky and you'll be able to go home at 7 p.m. and work till 10 p.m. or 2 a.m. or whatever it is. The difficulty in the budget, that's one that I'm still not good at managing. I'm pretty lucky at this point in that I am bringing in a couple $1,000s a month with Watch Me Code. I'm like $50 to $100 a month profitable in Signal Leaf, which took me a year to get to. And I haven't even paid down all that credit card debt yet. So you got to be careful with that kind of stuff. Stay out of the commodities business. And podcast hosting is a commodities business. That's where I really made my big mistake there, is not realizing that up front, because bandwidth is a commodity. And when somebody eats up all the bandwidth, what are you going to do about it?
How did you explain the 800 or 8,000, where it was, cost to just keep that client happy for a few months to the significant other?
Yeah, how did I explain all of that debt from that podcast that ate through my credit card to my wife? Very carefully, but also very honestly. She knew that I was sponsoring that podcast. She was cool with that from day one. She didn't know that I had $25,000 in credit card debt until I told her, look, I'm sorry. I made a lot of really bad decisions over the last year, and this is what we're staring at. And she was horrified. But we happen to be pretty lucky. I have her salary to live off of. Even if I completely belly up, our kids aren't going to starve. I'm incredibly lucky to have the wife that I do, because she trusts my judgment in business and in these kinds of matters. So hopefully you'll have a significant other that will be trusting of your judgment. My wife knows that I'm going to make mistakes and it's going to cost money. And she knows that I'm going to learn from those mistakes and I'm going to correct it. I was able to work out a way to pay down $20,000 of my $25,000 in debt in 2 months, just by emptying my savings accounts and closing a whole bunch of services and doing things that I wasn't comfortable doing, but ended up being better financial ideas. I got lucky with that. I still have about $5,000 in credit card debt left, and I now have 0 savings accounts. So instead of paying down credit cards every month, I'm now rebuilding my savings account. But that's the far better situation to be in, because I'm not paying monthly fees on those credit cards anymore. Other questions? Yes.
On the same topic of the client that ate the bandwidth, how did you go about having that conversation with them?
How did I tell that podcast that they were getting booted? Again, very carefully. I was very open and honest, which is paramount in business. Be open, be honest. I started out by praising them, first off, for the success of their podcast, which I truly felt. It was just amazing to see their success and see how quickly they grew and see the things that they were able to do with their podcast. So I started out with that. And then I slowly, tentatively worked into, however, all your success has me footing the bill. And you knew that this was happening because I've already talked to you about this a little bit, and that's why I'm sponsoring you and you're advertising for me. Unfortunately, that advertising that you're doing for me hasn't worked out. Here's my monthly income. I showed them. I opened the books. I said, here's my monthly income. Here's how much you're costing me. I'm sorry. I will do everything I can to help you move. I wrote features into Signal Leaf to help them move. I contacted 5 different podcast hosting services that were my competitors and talked to them directly. Because, I'm in the community. I have those contacts. So I talked to them, figured out what it would cost at all of these different ones, and made a recommendation to this podcast. And they went with my recommendation. And I helped them move. And, end of story, basically, at that point. They're happy with their host, and they're doing phenomenally well with their podcast. But it was a really difficult set of conversations to have.
How did you change your pricing model or hosting model?
How did I change my pricing model or hosting model to fix that particular problem? Sadly, I have not yet. That's one of the failings that I still have to deal with. Been incredibly lucky in that I have not yet had another podcast do that to me. I've been growing steadily, 3 or 4 new podcasts a month. And I'm finding that the average lifespan of a podcast there's an industry standard, first off, that says the average podcast will release 6 to 8 episodes. 80% of podcasts will be done after 8 episodes. But the people that end their podcast after 8 episodes still continue paying to host their podcast. It's kind of like a gym membership. You pay for that gym membership and you don't go most of the time. Gym memberships oversell the capacity. If every single subscriber, every single person that paid for that gym membership went to the gym all at once, it'd be a fire hazard. You would not be allowed to get in there because there'd be too many people. So podcast hosting is kind of in the same commodities business as gym memberships. As my subscriber base grows, I have the ability to absorb more and more high-volume podcasts. And I have a couple of pretty high-volume podcasts. My own Entrepreneurial podcast gets like 10,000, 12,000 downloads a month right now, which is pretty phenomenal. There's another one that a friend of mine does called Get Up and Code. It's all about fitness for developers. And it's a really good podcast. He gets like 50,000 downloads a month. I'm sorry, about 15,000 downloads a month right now, I think. So it's, pretty good sized podcast, but I'm absorbing those costs through my other subscribers. You find ways to offset. I really do need to fix the pricing model. I need to find some way to improve it. And I have ideas, I just don't have a lot of time. Because frankly, my entrepreneurial efforts still don't pay the bills. I make about 1/3 of my income off of my entrepreneurial efforts right now. But the majority of my bills come from client work. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. That's how I am finding time to do all the entrepreneurial work. I left the corporate world and working 20 to 30 hours, sometimes as much as 40 hours a week for my client. And that pays the bills and pays for the time and effort put into these other things. Yes.
It was in the news a few weeks ago. There was a patent troll going after Adam Carolla and stuff like that. Does that sort of threat scare you? Is it?
So yeah, the Adam Carolla and situation with the patent troll that was trying to sue Adam Carolla to get a whole bunch of money out of him. That situation did scare me. It really did. I was very nervous about the future of podcasting in general and the future of Signal Leaf. That particular situation turned out okay because the patent troll realized how little money podcasters actually make, even at the scale of Adam Carolla. There's not a lot of money there. You don't do podcasting for money. You do it for exposure, for building your audience, for building relationships with people. Because frankly, podcasting is a very intimate medium, and that's where you make your money is off those relationships. But yeah, when I see things like that, I get terrified. Sorry.
Go through a big period of research, like, am I infringing on stuff?
A little bit. Did I do a period of research to look at those patents? And I did a little bit, only through media articles. So I didn't read the patents directly, and I was confident that it would turn out okay, but still very worried.
What was the issue?
The issue was there's a patent out there that covers episodic content delivered through the internet, which is essentially the definition of a podcast. And it was so very vaguely, poorly written, and it was. I can't remember the details of it. There were a lot of high-profile people saying that this was too vague, too open-ended to really be enforceable. Adam Carolla ended up settling out of court, so we don't know whether or not it would have upheld. And this is a long time. And this is like 6 months, a year ago, and I haven't really kept up with that situation, so I don't remember the details. You'll have to go look it up. I'm probably misquoting a whole lot of things. Yes, one more.
How disciplined are you about your schedule for writing code?
How disciplined am I about my
You set
schedule?
times aside, you know, tell
Right.
your wife and kids I can't be bothered, or
Right. Do I discipline and scheduling for doing this stuff? In some respects, I am very disciplined. My wife has a job. My kids go to school and daycare. When they're gone, I work. That's my discipline. When they're home, I try to work less, but there are some things that I find very easy to do while I'm still taking care of my kids. I can write emails while I'm taking care of the kids. I can do these drawings while I'm taking care of the kids. They love watching me draw. You know, I give them access to my iPad to let them draw, and they color on things, and it's great. You know, it's part of what we do together. Sometimes they sit in my lap while I'm working on some crunch deadline thing, and they read a book, or I tell them what I'm doing and how important it is for me to get it done, and it's stressful. It is, but the real discipline that I employ in my schedule, though, is at a very macro level. I decide week to week what I'm going to be working on ahead of time. This week, Signal. Okay, first of all, every week is client work, guaranteed. But for my entrepreneurial stuff, this week it's Signal Week. Next week it's Watch Me Code. Week after that, it's panicking about writing this talk. I guess at this point I'll call the session done. If anybody has any other questions for me, please come find me afterwards. I'm more than happy to share any of my secrets, which I really don't carry as secrets. So thanks again for all the questions and for attending.